for you. Here we go, brownies. Here we go. Here we go, brownies. Here we go. Yeah, this for my dogs from the east to the west side. You rockin' brown and orange with me, baby. Let's ride. Represent the land, let them know. Tell them, here we go, brownies. Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Here We Go Brownies podcast. I am Allie Ullery coming at you live from Pensacola, Florida, and it is great to be back. I took a 3-week hiatus, if you will. It was on my honeymoon, so it's very good to be back, but there's nothing to talk about, Dustin. Nothing happened while I was gone. Nothing to note, so going to be a pretty boring show, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Myles Garrett didn't request a trade. He didn't go on Radio Row with the Super Bowl.
No.
It didn't get other players a little squishy about what they want to do with the Browns.
Happened.
The Chiefs didn't three-peat. There's lots of things that we'll get into tonight. Yeah. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I'm just happy to be back. We were on our honeymoon 3 weeks, and I'll tell you, it was an absolute blast. We had such a wonderful time. It was wonderful. We went skiing in Switzerland, but 3 weeks is a long time. I'm happy to be back, be home, be on Central Time, and be part of it. I'll tell you what, we woke up from the Luka Doncic trade. I woke up to that. It happened in the middle of the night. I was sleeping, and I genuinely hallucinating and crazy. Yes, so much has happened. So, long story short, we can never leave the country again.
No, so let me ask you this, Allie. Now, I thought about your vacation / honeymoon, because it's almost like an extended vacation at that point. Did you think 3 weeks was too long? Because to me, 3 weeks would seem like 2 weeks for me would be perfect if I wanted to take it in. But 3 weeks seems like I'm almost disjointed and disconnected from my normal life.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what type of trip it is. So we went to Europe. We did we started in New York, then we went to we flew to Milan, went to Austria, and then Switzerland. We did St. Moritz, Zermatt, and Geneva. So I guess if you were doing a beach trip, if you're just going to be sipping a fruity cocktail by the pool, I would say 3 weeks is definitely too long to do that. Right. But with us, we were skiing, we were traveling, so it was really broken up. I think for me personally, I probably won't do 3 weeks again just because it's so much. I miss the dogs, it was a lot like that.
You miss your family, right?
Yeah. But I mean, no, I don't think the trip was too long. We did have some hiccups along the way, of course, with Allie and David. Of course, we're going to have a couple of bumps. This is crazy, but I don't know if you know this. Florida is not meant to have snow, and we don't have the resources to deal with it. So while we were gone, we have a pool enclosure, which is screen and metal. And we had a foot of snow here in Pensacola, and actually our entire crate, or the cage that it's in, busted, ripped off part of the roof, fell into the pool, possibly damaged the timer. So we actually just literally 5 minutes ago, the contractor just left. So it's been chaotic. Why not? Why not? So
it didn't melt off. It just collapsed, right? It didn't melt off. It collapsed. Well, I mean, it's not made for snow.
No. Yeah. We got a call from our house sitter. Hey, your pool enclosure collapsed. There's 12 feet of snow, and we don't have a shovel here. Why would we? It's Florida. And I'm just very thankful because the dogs actually hang out there a lot because it is screened in. Right. That would have been devastating. Everybody's okay. We're good. But of course, we had a couple of hiccups while we were on.
So how much total snow did Pensacola get in the city?
A foot of snow.
How much was it? Do you know, a foot?
Yeah, we got a foot of snow.
Well, and it probably didn't help. I mean, it's weird, but this, you're next to a body of water, Cleveland's next to a body of water, and if something gets cold, it takes the moisture off the ocean, I'm assuming.
It was chaotic.
Yeah, I mean, it helped fan the flames of a foot.
Just of course it snowed while we were gone. I mean,
when you got back, there was no snow, obviously, when you got back.
No, today it was 75 degrees. So how quickly things change here. But nonetheless, everybody, I'm very happy to be back. Thank you all for tuning in while I was gone. I'm I know Ray did such a good job filling in. I know you had some great guests. So thank you,
Yeah.
Dustin, for continuing to pump out the content. But we're really picking things up here. Yeah.
As I said, it was actually the last podcast I renamed the Leroy Horde podcast because he gave us an hour of content. We love Leroy Horde, but man, he has an opinion, and sometimes you just got to let people go and let them vent it out. And he was disappointed you weren't here, but I said, well, you'll get more Allie. She's coming back. So and he was on like what's called the ESPN Reporter Show just that same week with Ian Rappaport. And everybody, I'm trying to think of her. Is it Alan? What's the gal's name? The gal that does all the impersonations, she's like a coach.
Amy,
Alger or something like that. Yeah. So they did a whole thing, and so, but it was cool to have him on because he was talking about the Super Bowl coming up and all that, and he really went down. So you're gonna love this, Allie. I did not precursor Leroy Horde. I text him. We don't talk very much on the phone because he does radio for 4 hours. So picture the screen here, Allie. Here's the stage set where I said, Leroy, if in an ideal world, what would you do in this draft? And he goes, well, this is what I would do. If we're going to trade Myles Garrett, and we'll get into this, he goes, if you have the Cowboys pick and you have our own pick, you go get your quarterback, and then you go get Ashton Genty at number 10. And Ray just goes like this. Like he goes, oh, you just fed. He goes, did you two talk before this? I'm like, nope, actually we did not talk about. And he talked about picking Ashton. He goes, you get your once in a generational running back, and you get hopefully your once in a decade quarterback to solve the quarterback problem. He goes, you can do a 1-2 punch. And I was like,
look, crazy. We're going to get right into draft talk. So I think that's not a crazy thing. I think it's possible. Unfortunately, before we do that, I think we need to talk about Myles Garrett. So let's just go ahead and get into it, Dustin, because we've got plenty to talk about. We are going to have David on here in just a few moments with some really interesting conversations surrounding Guardian Caps. So I'm really excited to talk about that with David here in just a few moments. So I've got to do a sponsor read. I haven't had to do one of these, Dustin, in several weeks. So let's see if I still have it. But we're going to kick it off with Stadium Mustard. If you don't have Stadium Mustard in your kitchen this season, you're doing it wrong. The iconic brand, the iconic taste, beloved from ballparks to backyards and everywhere in between. Stadium Mustard is a smooth brown mustard rich in both taste and tradition. By the way, it is loved by millions. So be sure to head on over to stadiummustard.com to shop now.
Speaking of Stadium Mustard, our good friend Larry Lorello was down in Florida. He lives in Fort Myers, Florida. And he was like, he sends me this random picture. He goes, look what I found in a grocery store in Florida, and it was Stadium Mustard. So I thought that was pretty random. He's like, I couldn't believe I saw it on the shelf. So I thought that was pretty cool. So that's right. Yeah. If you don't have it where you live, ask for it, and maybe they'll put it on the shelf for you.
You never know. Okay, let's kick it off with Myles Garrett. Similarly, I was in I woke up to the Luka Doncic trade, and I just couldn't believe that was crazy. Similarly, we were in Geneva, and David, he's sitting there on his phone, and he just gets this look on his face, and he goes white, and he's like, hey, I have really bad news. And he's like, it's about a trade. And I was like, oh God. Like I said, is it the Cavs? And he goes, no. Is it the Browns? And he said, uh-huh. And I said, don't tell me. I just knew. So I had to take it.
You knew who it involved.
Right? I knew who it was right away. So what I did in a very dramatic fashion was I threw myself on the floor because what else are you going to do?
Do we have video?
I think there might be a photo. There might be a photo that we can put on the screen. Additionally, after all of that happened, David was like, let's go. We're going to go get a cocktail. So he went and got me a couple of martinis, which was very appreciated. But it really got me thinking. This trade request puts things into perspective very, very quickly as Browns fans to realize Myles is doing and saying the things that everybody in that organization, the players and whatnot, are probably thinking. They want out. This is dysfunction. Is it crazy to say that right now to be a Browns fan is semi-worse, or if not significantly worse than 1-15, 0-16? Where's the direction? Where's the culture? What is this? And I think this is a very dark time to be a Browns fan, especially having to deal with the quarterback situation, just a terrible losing season this past year, and then your potential first ballot Hall of Famer edge rusher wants out of Cleveland. And not only wants out, but very publicly kind of going after Andrew Berry, and goes on Radio Row at the Super Bowl, and also has other players questioning whether or not they want to be in Cleveland. It very, very quickly just puts you into perspective. Like this, what we thought was this Browns window came and went so fast, Dustin.
Yeah, and I guess I'll push a little bit back on that, and I guess not disagree with you, but a little bit in the fact that more came out of that after that, kind of his Radio Row thing. And what I thought was interesting was, you're right. He did definitely take a little bit of a stab at Andrew Berry when he said, my goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton, right? Because he was literally using Andrew Berry's words verbatim, right? That wasn't by accident that he did that. That was very much intentional. But what I think was interesting, then you had Njoku, which we all love and has been a guest of the show, came out on Radio Road at the Super Bowl and said, come on, man, we came in together. I don't think we're done. You've said it yourself, Myles. We're not that far off. If we figure out the quarterback position, we are just fine. And I think, and that made me almost, as a fan, that gloom and doom kind of area. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's the Commanders this year. They fixed the quarterback position and they were off to the races with a rookie quarterback. And I'm like, I don't think we are that far off if that really is, the case. And then I listened to Jameis Winston, God, I can take Jameis Winston all day long. And what he did at the Super Bowl as a digital, he knocked it out of the ballpark being this digital reporter for Fox. Like he has got a future in broadcasting. Let me just put it there. But he said, because they were asking him, he's a free agent, right? So now they were interviewing him, what was the culture like in Cleveland? Because you played with Myles. He goes, now I was only there 1 year, but he goes, I can tell you this from the front office down. It didn't seem like an organization that was deteriorating. Like he literally said that. And I was like, well, yeah, because it doesn't look that way. It doesn't feel that way. And so what I think when it comes down to Myles Garrett, and maybe I'm sitting here today thinking he might have done us a blessing in disguise. And what I mean by that is he's been with the Cleveland Browns for 8 years. He's given us everything we've asked him. He's played through injury. He's played through his foot issue that we all know that he's had since childhood. And he probably is looking at Father Time and saying, I've got 4 good years left in the National Football years of elite play, we'll say, in his mind. I got 2 years left on my contract. I think I got maybe 4, maybe 6 if I'm lucky left. I got less left than I do. I got less years ahead of me than I do behind me as far as trying to capture that championship. And I think he may have said, I love Cleveland. And he did. He said, I love the fans. I love what they do here. I will be forever gracious to the Cleveland community. And that's true. But then you look at, and he's probably, and if I'm the front office now, and I know the front office currently has kind of a tough stance. We're not trading him, and they put that wall up. But if you do trade him, he's got 2 years left on his deal.
Yeah.
Another team can sign him to a pretty good deal. And by the way, if you ask for a king's ransom, you might fix this organization quicker than you realize.
That's a good point.
And pull Houston Texans, where you have multiple draft picks, and if you hit only on half of them, oh, you're in a good space, right? Like it isn't like it ain't tear down, it's just retool at that point. And it's like, I don't know, like I look at it like maybe he did do this to say, look, I want out, but I don't want to leave you empty, because guess what? He could have literally stayed here for the next 2 years, and at the end of his deal said, see ya, adios, I'm out. I'm a free agent. And then the Browns would have got 0 for Myles Garrett. Nothing. So
no, first off, I will say I was doom and gloom. Here's the photo of me. I hit the ground. That's in Geneva. I just
leave it to David to be able to find that photo like quickly. I love it, David.
He said, all right, let's go get a martini. And I said, I'm never smiling again.
I did see this picture. I
said, I'm never going to smile again. But that quickly went away. And it went away when Myles hit Radio Row. And I think that did turn some fans on Myles. I can't say like I'm totally out on Myles Garrett. I so appreciate what he did in Cleveland. Just a few days ago, he was the reigning, defensive player of the year. Now it's Pat Surtain. But I see the comment here from Brian about, let's see where it is. The Myles relationship was never perfect. There was things on both sides that sucked. The Browns drafting him in 2017 and then not winning a game that year. And then Myles going on for his suspension, missing several games because of that, and then wrecking the car and missing several from that. There was never a perfect year for Myles. And a lot of fans started to turn really after some of those instances. And I agree, Brian, in your comment up here, take the picks. I think, especially after those conversations on Radio Row, see what you can get for the player. Maybe he is doing the Browns kind of a solid, and trying to get people to turn on him and whatnot. Maybe that's the ultimate goal. I don't know. But you can get a lot for this player. Just like you said, Dustin, you can turn the organization around very, very quickly. And I love Myles, but he is not the only thing that matters on this team. You still have very, very solid defensive players, a very solid defense with or without Myles Garrett. You still have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Of course, we know that he was injured this past season, so we're uncertain what his 2025 season is going to look like. Denzel Ward, if he sticks around, MJ Emerson. I mean, you've got guys that you can build around. And if you are able to obtain a few first-round picks, maybe a player, I think you take those calls. So I think it's all smoke right now. It always is leading up to the draft. This could be one of those things that happens on draft night. I don't know. We're going to talk about a couple of prospects because I don't think you can replace Myles. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, he is. I don't think you can replace him, but you can still get disruptive players that can come in and help you immediately. Some of those guys are available in the draft. Maybe they're available via a trade or free agency. We're going to talk about that. But nonetheless, it still sucks. And I think it's fair for everybody to feel those feelings, but also be eager to see what's next. I think that's kind of where I sit with it. It just sucks. But I don't blame him. I see it. This year sucked. His tenure with the Browns hasn't been great. So I get it. All right. We're going to bring on David here. This interview is brought to you by our friends over at Lorello Vineyards.
Hello, here we go, Brownies Nations. We are here at Lorello Vineyards with Larry Lorello to talk about the special Curtain Call wine.
Yeah, Curtain Call is one of our most prestigious wines we have here. A gentleman by the name of Ari Esther, back in 1968, planted the first vinifera grapes here in Northeast Ohio. This wine represents his 2020 vintage. It was also his last vintage. Come on out and try it. It's a special wine. It means a lot to all of us here, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
That's right, guys. Just 1 hour's drive, less than 1 hour's drive, actually, from downtown Cleveland. Come check out Larry Lorello and his vineyard out at Lorello Vineyards in Ashtabula County.
All right, let's bring him on. Dr. David Ullery, the husband of the program. David, what's happening?
Hello, Allie and Dustin. Thanks for having me on as always. I will say, speaking of wine, we had some phenomenal wine on our trip. We like wine. Chateauneuf de Pau was our favorite.
We got the vintage was 2000, year 2000. It was Chateauneuf. And I'm very excited to talk to Larry about that when we see him next. I've got some questions.
Mm-hmm.
David, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Still riding the high of the honeymoon. Still riding the high of that Ohio State National Championship, and really clinging on to that more than any sort of bad news that we've had to come across in the sporting world since then. And I'm envisioning. I'm out here by the pool right now, and I know you kind of talked about it on the show already. And right now, it is unusable. It is non-functional. It's dangerous even. But I'm just envisioning a month, 2 months from now when it's back to function and we can be enjoying it in the sun, and I just can't wait.
Yeah, Brian says, should I put you on the porch, David? I actually did. So normally he's in the
That's funny.
dining room, but I said, hey, can you go outside and do this? Because if I can hear him in there, it really bothers me.
Yeah.
and you hear something and like there's a little bit of a delay. I actually lost my AirPods when I was in New York. Somebody stole them, so I have to get some new ones. So I said, hey, outside, brother.
Plus, the house is very echoey right now too, because we're doing redecorating, so there's no couch in the big room.
So
David, I was going to tell you, I had the opportunity, and I told Allie this, and we are going to have a Ohio State Buckeye champion on next week. I don't know if Allie told you that, but to go down there and see Will Howard in person and those guys, it was like kind of crazy. Like they had 13 of them in a room, and I was like, these are the champions. Like 10 days after them winning that. I will say Will Howard looks NFL ready. Sawyer did say this. Which was really interesting to me. As Allie, he's an Ohio kid, actually was raised down there right by Columbus. And he says, I would love to stay in Ohio and play for the Cleveland Browns. I'm like, that's what I like to hear from you. And I think and I will tell you, the line was bigger for Sawyer than it was for Will Howard. And I know there was snow, but I think he really he won the fans because, I've only lived here a year, but he won the fans literally defending, the flag plant with Michigan and what he did with those guys. And then the fact of the play that he made against Texas, I think from a fan standpoint, they really rallied around him as a player. But he is a big man, Jack Sawyer. And by the way, that entire offensive line, they're huge. They're huge, man. They're huge.
It's big boys.
They're big boys. So, I'm 6'1", and they were towering over me. I mean, these guys are 6'6", 6'7", some of these guys. They're big guys.
So before we get into medical talk with Dr. David Ullery, the husband of the program, Jason brings up a point, and I want to talk about it. Let's talk about Will Howard. David, you're perfectly qualified to talk about this. Nobody knows him better than David. Watched every single snap, and we've talked about this. We've talked about the kind of progression of Will Howard. Early on, we were like, they're not really letting him throw the ball down the field. And if he does, it comes short. And then at one point in the season, like they had him on somewhat of a short leash just because of some of the turnovers and, just not being able to get the ball to the playmakers. But then really later in the season, and especially fueled by the Michigan loss, it was game on. And very, very quickly, we sat here, we watched him, we said, he's becoming not only a very just credible draft prospect, but potential first rounder. I want to get your thoughts on this, both of you. I mean, Dustin, you said he looks the part. What are your thoughts on Will Howard in this draft class?
David, go ahead.
I think just as you alluded to, his draft stock improved dramatically as the season wrapped up, and I think one of the most valuable things and impressive things that he displayed in my mind is his ability to learn and improve as a fourth year starter, fourth year player in college football. From week 1 to January 20th, you saw this man improve on the football field. And I think it just took him getting the right coaching on top of him and to direct him. We talked about it early on. Like we were like, man, can he throw the deep ball? Is he going to be able to use Jeremiah Smith the way that we want him to? We really weren't confident that he could, but he openly talked about it towards the end of the year and how much he worked on his footwork and focused on that. And you could see, I remember in particular, I forget which game it was, but there was a game where you could watch him. And when he rushed his steps and his footwork, he was overthrowing the ball or he was underthrowing it. And he wasn't accurate and the deep ball wasn't working. But then he just had laser focus at the end of the season. And he just turned it on. And I'm like, I have goosebumps thinking about it just because we're fans. But I think he really showed that he can develop and grow and be coached. I think being coachable is so important, both in college and in the NFL. And he put that on full display. He's got the arm strength. He definitely has the IQ and the football intelligence. And he's got the big body to withstand the beating that you're going to take in the NFL. So I think he's a tremendous prospect. And I think a team's going to be very lucky to have him because not only is he a great athlete, he's a leader too. I mean, he will get you fired up. That man played for Ohio State for one season. He's a Buckeye for life. He's a legend. And it's just, I really am excited to see his opportunity in the NFL now.
I'm covered in goosebumps just talking about that. Yeah. Not only as a Buckeye fan, but when you look at, okay, let's have this conversation. The current Browns quarterback room, you can't say that you could say that maybe about Jameis. He's a leader. These guys want to play with him. Not to be a Watson hater, but I mean, I will be. Don't look at him and say, hey, maybe, at the end of the day, even if he's having a bad game, we can rely on his leadership, his accountability. You can't. And even with DTR, that's not what he was known for at UCLA. And I think that if you can get Will Howard maybe a little bit later, I wouldn't take him at 2. I want to be abundantly clear on that. Exactly, Brian. I would take Abdul Carter number 2 overall, and then draft Will Howard if I'm Andrew Berry.
Completely agree.
But just the intangibles, the things that you really can't coach, the leadership, his size, his speed, not only his ability to throw the ball well downfield, deep and intermediate, but also making plays with his legs outside of the pocket. I'm just really impressed with Will Howard. I'm Jason, I saw your comment. I'm sold.
Yeah, so I have an interesting perspective on him. So again, a lot of this is going to come down to what the Cleveland Browns do in the next month. Do we bring in like a Kirk Cousins or someone like a Sam Darnold that's going to be that bridge quarterback to develop someone like Will Howard? Because we're not taking a guy at number 2.
Right.
But if we don't find that guy and we do draft a quarterback at number 2, this conversation it doesn't matter at that point. But I will tell you this. I took the perspective of what I saw, and I think I have a unique lens being an outsider looking in and not having the scarlet and rose glasses on, right? And this is literally what I did through this process. I watched this guy that basically got to host a home game against the Tennessee Volunteers. Then he went on the road. So I translation to this like the NFL. Then this quarterback went into the hostile environment in California in the Rose Bowl with the Oregon Duck fans, like a road playoff game, which it truly was. And then what did he do? He went to Texas and did the exact same thing in front of all those Texas fans. Didn't blink, didn't flinch. And then obviously a neutral site. Well, that's like a Super Bowl. Of course it's a neutral site. And if you translate that to the NFL, he's got the damn moxie is what I was saying. It's like he fits that confident moxie, let's go out and do it. And you're right, David, if we can get that bridge quarterback and he can develop behind someone like Kirk Cousins that's, plays this Stefanski type of offense that he can learn from, and the Browns go after Carter and somehow get Genty, you fixed a lot of problems in one draft and have a ton of draft picks left to fill in the holes at offensive line and everything else. I mean, you can have a trend. I mean, you can have I said this a couple weeks ago with Ray on the show. This draft is so important to the Browns. It's going to change the dynamics of this team for the next 5 to 7 years. They got to hit on these guys. And if they're going to retool and not tear it down, they got to think, okay, Myles is gone, but we got to get that Carter. We love Nick Chubb, but he's not the Nick Chubb of 3 or 4 years ago. By the way, the offensive line. And by the way, if Howard is that guy that we're going to hit on, and he has the moxie, which I truly believe he does, well, damn it, go get him at the top of the second round with our number 34th pick or whatever that is. I think we're good. And then we can sit back and go, shit, the Browns got an A- in this draft or whatever that may look like based on them. Because we know Andrew Berry can manipulate the draft. I don't doubt that he can, take players and move things around. We have 2 third-round picks this year. If he gets a second round, we're in good shape, guys. I mean, we're in a really good position for a football team then. I mean, David, what do you think? I think there's those kind of moves can change an organization for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this will be a defining draft, especially some first-round draft picks, which you haven't had in so long. And so I agree with both of you, and Allie and I have talked about it extensively about what you take it to, what you do it to. I think Abdul Carter is a generational talent, and the way he played one-armed against Notre Dame and almost single-handedly beat them, like, you got to take the man. Yeah, I think that there's a ton of implications in terms of like what direction you go. And I think, I don't know, I tend to think that the value that you could get with someone like Abdul Carter may be much more impactful than the top quarterbacks in this draft. I just don't think this is a very quarterback heavy draft. And I think in the mid range, there's more value than there is at the top range in terms of like where you're picking them. A mid second round pick for Jackson Dart or Will Howard, I think, is going to give you more value than number 2 overall with Shador or Cam Ward. So that's kind of where I'm at.
this is hard because this is a defining draft. I mean, we just saw the comment that was posted, this is the team that's going into Brook Park, essentially. This is the next 5 to 10 years. Let's just say the next decade of what this team's going to be. A couple of things on that. And I love Will Howard. I do. But at the end of the day, you still hold the number 2 overall draft pick. And you have a question of, do we take best available or do we take a quarterback? So I'm just going to read something here from Tyler Johnson on Twitter that I saved the other day. The Browns have had a top 10 pick 14 times since 1999. They have taken a quarterback in the top 10 during that time twice. Tim Couch and Baker Mayfield. Those are the only 2 quarterbacks that they have taken in the top 10 since the return. So I guess the argument there is, when you are picking in the top 5, let alone the top 3, you take a quarterback. Nathan Zagura made the point today on Cleveland Browns Daily that was circulating all over Twitter. Everybody had an opinion, but he said, there's no certain thing when it comes to the NFL draft. The hit rate is probably 50% at best. You cannot guarantee that any of these players work out at any position. But one thing is for certain, you cannot win in the National Football League if you don't have a quarterback. So when you look at it that way and you don't have a bridge quarterback currently, I mean, you've got Deshaun Watson on the roster. That's it. You have to bring somebody in to assist with whoever this young quarterback is, if that's the route that they go down. I want to highlight this comment that was up here from Brian. The biggest question we should be asking, can we develop a rookie quarterback without a veteran leading the way? And that's a really good question because I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. It depends on the rookie quarterback, right? I think that if you throw Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward in that, yes, you can. But if we're talking about Jackson Dart, I really think, or Will Howard even to that matter, you have to have somebody else that can kind of lead the way, learn the system a little bit. So I think sitting at number 2, it's so difficult at this point just because this isn't a total rebuild. I said at the top of the show, you still have JOK, you still have Denzel Ward, you still have Nick Chubb, even though he's coming off of a tough injury. Great receiver room, great tight ends. Like, you've got a good roster, even though this past year didn't go the way that you wanted to. Look at Washington. Dustin, you brought this up a few moments ago. You get the quarterback. You go almost all the way to the Super Bowl. Quarterback matters. You have to have it.
With a rookie contract, no less.
You have to capitalize on these cheap contracts. Now, obviously, we know that the Browns get severely overspent when it comes to the quarterback situation. So they don't really have room to talk.
They didn't spend $250 million on a quarterback. What are you talking about?
But at the end of the day, you don't hold this position that often. And then I guess if you are saying, okay, go get Abdul Carter at number 2. The question is, okay, is he Myles Garrett replacement level? Or is he Jadeveon Clowney? Is he, is he going to be a generational pass rusher? Is he more of kind of a Joey Bosa? Like, what does this look like? Can he come in and be disruptive in week 1? I don't know.
I think, that's a great point. In terms of, it's more or less looking at the ceiling or the floor more than it is the ceiling when it comes to this pick, because it's exactly it. Like, let's say you drafted Bill Carter and it's a bust. Like, yeah, you're disappointed, you're bummed out because you put this big pick on him, but like, it's not necessarily going to wreck your team. But if you take a quarterback and he has this high ceiling, like you said, 2 quarterbacks drafted in those top 10, in those 14 top 10 drafts. And we've all seen the jersey, the Browns jersey with the 20 different quarterbacks listed on it. This team needs a quarterback.
40.
Well, but so, Allie, you're exactly right. Like, this team needs a quarterback. You have all the pieces in place. Take the risk on the quarterback. I think that makes a ton of sense. And you have 2 guys who, at least based on some guys, on some people's analysis, that drafted out as first round values, and Cam Ward and actually Quinn Ewers, of all quarterbacks. And so there are quarterbacks there. And even if I, like I said earlier, if I didn't feel like it's the best high end prospect draft, there's still a top 3 quarterback, and you have to roll the dice. You're exactly right. You don't get a number 2 overall pick very often, especially with the roster that you currently have.
Yeah.
I think we lucked into it, to be honest with you, David, because as we were going down the season, we were projected like a 5-6, and then the Giants got stupid and won a game, and things started shifting around. I mean, they got stupid. I'm sorry, they got stupid. They need a quarterback. They got rid of Daniel Jones, and they decided to go win a game. Like, hello, I'm not saying the NFL's fixed, but come on, guys, you need a quarterback. And then all of a sudden, the Browns slipped to number 2. And to Nathan Zagura's point, he thinks there's 2 really good quarterbacks in this draft, and lo and behold, we're at number 2, right? So, and guess what? One of them's going to hit, one of them's going to not. To your point, one of those guys is going to be a quarterback that ends up starting in the National Football League and probably being good. Now, I know you guys were away, but we had a very interesting guest. We had John Wooten on, 88 years old, a very sound mind, Browns 64 NFL championship a couple weeks ago. Best friends with Jim Brown. And when you look at his resume of what he did outside of being a great offensive guy, he said, I'm going to tell you something. I was around Shedeur Sanders since the age of 10 years old. 10 years old, because he's from Texas. And he goes, I was around him. I've been around Deion Sanders. I'm actually an alum of the University of Colorado. I went out to when Deion became the head coach there. It was snowing. I told my wife to get a coat because it will snow in April in Colorado. I guarantee it, and it did. But he said this, and I thought that was interesting. He goes, that kid don't blink. He has the most accurate completion passing for a college quarterback this year, as far as percentage-wise. And he's had the most pressure around him his entire life. So the lights will never be too big for Shedeur Sanders for pressure. And I thought, and I said, okay, well then, Wooten, if you're there, who would you pick? He goes, if Shedeur Sanders is there, I'm not even thinking about it. I don't care who calls us at number 2. I'm going to take him because, and then you look at his resume. Not only was John Wooten a great player for the Cleveland Browns, he was an agent, he was a scout, and he won a Super Bowl ring with the Dallas Cowboys front office, the Baltimore Ravens, and was in the front office when the Eagles went to the playoffs. So the guy has seen everything in his life, from players to front offices. So I found that, and I wasn't on the Shedeur Sanders train at all. Like, I was like, no, trade down, whatever. But it was such an interesting perspective for a guy that's been around that kid since he was 10 years old, and to really hear him go through that process of like, don't sleep on him because he's ready. And then after this couple, I mean, you guys have probably seen this too, Deion Sanders came out and said, look, I've talked to all the teams except the Titans, but my son has talked to the Titans, and we've put it in God's hands. I'm not going to interfere where he ends up going if he gets traded out of that position or whatever. So this whole smoke of, Deion doesn't want him coming to the Browns, I think that was a bunch of to get headlines and get clicks on the internet. So either way, I'm fine. I can live and sleep if the Browns pass and they build a defense, to replace Myles, or they take Will Howard at the top side. I can live in both spaces and be happy as a Browns fan.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's the thing. I will be happy at quarterback with the following. Cam Ward, thrilled. I'm happy. Experience at a big time program. That is what this front office likes. Shedeur Sanders, I think he's got a very high ceiling. I mean, I think that I also think that the media is kind of portraying him to be polarizing and a little bit of a
villain, a little bit of a villain. Yeah.
And I don't think that is the case. I mean, we haven't seen that out of him his entire career. It's just now that he's got the name. So this is what's coming with it. Not to his fault necessarily. And 3, I'd be happy with, I guess 4. We'll do 4 of them. You can talk me into a Will Howard, Jackson Dart situation. Let me propose this. Is there a possibility where, the Browns look at their current roster and say, hey, we have holes on our roster, but we don't have as many as we did in 2016, 2017. What if we take Shedeur Sanders at 2, and then in the 3rd round, if Will Howard's there, let's grab him too. Kind of do a Washington situation with RG3 and Kirk Cousins. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. And if it works, it works. If not, you've got a trade situation. So you could tell me. I mean, I don't think Will Howard will be there, but in the event, right?
Well, but I mean, think about this. I don't think it's crazy because you're right. You're going to hit 50% of the time, right? And what's crazy, I mean, it's not crazy what you're saying there because I I thought about that too. If the Browns take it second, but what happens if our trade involves, we'll say the Dallas Cowboys, where they want the number 10, or they want our pick, right? Or whatever that is, and a quarterback slides down for whatever reason, and we get a quarterback or whatever in that situation, or maybe the Giants want to move up, or whatever that ends up being, right? It's something weird happens in the draft and somebody takes Hunter or something because they want the skill guy. It's not crazy because a lot of this is we don't know yet because of the Myles Garrett trade that we know is probably coming. Because if they give us a first round and a second round and next year's first, okay, you can really manipulate a draft now. Like you can actually own the draft board, kind of like the Texans did a couple of years ago when they had the bevy of picks that we gave to them, God forbid, and they turned that into a playoff team. So I'm just saying we can reverse course and pull a Houston Texans because now we do have all these picks and now we can manipulate this. So I don't think it's far-fetched, Ali, to where the Browns could take two quarterbacks. And then guess what? You get through training camp and everybody needs a quarterback. There's always someone desperate. There's an injury or something happens. And then you can be like, hey, we got a guy. You need him? Oh, give us another pick. And all of a sudden you're doing things that you're supposed to do as a GM, right? And get the most, because we hear this from Andrew Berry all the time. I am always looking to make this team and improve and make it better, right? He said that. He said that multiple times in press conference. I'm always looking day to day how I can manipulate and make this a better team. That's all that Andrew Berry is going to do, I would assume, during draft day. But again, it's all going to come down to Myles Garrett. What happens with this trade?
All right. More of that to come because that's all that we'll be talking about until April. But we're going to turn it over to, I guess, some medical things. David, before we do so, I do want to tell you about our friends over at 5 Iron Golf. Guys, this is where golf is inclusive for everybody, whether you're just getting started in your golf game or it's raining and you want to go get some shots up. Head on over to 5 Iron Golf and get a drink, get some food. Play a couple of courses. Go check them out over at 5 Iron Golf. All right, David, I will turn it over to you. What do we got?
So, yes, the medical moment. We can talk about some medical stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love talking about draft stuff, though. I mean, it's a daily conversation in our house. But anything sort of medically related, Browns related, no huge updates. I've been looking for anything on JOK, and there's nothing out there. I mean, I'm sure you may have seen that he posted on Instagram a story during the Super Bowl. Like, as a competitor, it's really hard watching instead of playing in the Super Bowl, which I get that. Doesn't really mean anything, though, in terms of like if he's coming back or not and what that timeline looks like. So there's no updates on JOK and really no other like breaking news in terms of injuries or surgeries or anything for the roster as a whole, as far as I'm aware. There were some reports that came out at the end of the season that said that this year there was the lowest number of concussions in the league since the mid 2010s. And so a lot of people kind of jumped to the conclusion, is it the Guardian Caps? And I mean, I think it's worth having that conversation. There is potentially correlation. We have no idea if there's causation, but we know that more Guardian Caps were worn in the league this year during games than ever has been, and there are less concussions. So a logical conclusion could be that there were less concussions because of Guardian Caps, but there has to be a study done. We have to really look into those details and those stats and see if players who wore Guardian Caps actually got concussions or not, because we don't know who actually had those concussions and if they wore the caps or not and if they made a difference or not. But shortly after that report came out, there was a study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, of all journals, titled "The Association Between Guardian Cap Use During Practices and Sport-Related Concussion Risk in High School American Football Players." This was done in conjunction with University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they looked at 2,600 high school athletes from 41 different Wisconsin high schools that were self-selected into Guardian Cap or non-Guardian Cap groups. And basically, what the results looked at or came down to is that there were 180 athletes who sustained a concussion. And the Guardian Cap was not associated with a decreased risk of having a concussion in practice whatsoever. So at least in this study of a decent number, 2,600 players, the Guardian Cap did not make a difference. The players who wore it did not have less concussions. The players who didn't wear it did not have more concussions. it was kind of equal amongst guardian cap wearers or non-guardian cap wearers how many concussions they had. So right as soon as that came out about the NFL, we had a pretty decent study, a prospective study, which is the best kind in terms of data quality, that stated, at least based on this, guardian caps don't do anything. So it's still kind of out there. They're still tinkering with them. I've seen some reports or some articles about the new design that's come out and a different style of guardian cap. And so they're not going to go away. We're going to see them continue to be worn throughout training camp and the next football season and many football seasons to come after that. And hopefully we just continue to compile more data that really tells us if they make a difference or not. So as much as that report is encouraging that there were less concussions this season, it doesn't necessarily mean it's because of the guardian caps.
Small sample size. Yeah, this is really the first year.
Can I ask you a question on that, David? Speaking of guardian caps, like as I sat here and thinking, I know why the reason they use them, like even in young children, adults, high school, and now adults in the NFL. I wonder if there's any correlation, because the human body is still developing and growing, right? As well as everything with, your bones and all that as you become a full adult at 18. Do you think there's any correlation to that once you're at full strength and body that, you know what I mean, that the guardian cap would not be as beneficial? I wonder if there's something to that, because I could see like a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old kid wearing the guardian cap because clearly he's not developed, right? Like all that is you're not fully developed as a person. So I was just wondering if there's any correlation or if they've looked at that, like, from a full adult, matured adult versus like adolescence. It'd be interesting to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, not that I'm aware of. Is there any data kind of looking directly at that? You can extrapolate from this study that theory would not be supported just because this was done in high school athletes who technically probably are not fully developed, and the guardian cap did not make a difference for them. And so while that's a bit of a stretch and kind of an assumption, it's at least one conclusion you could draw, is that it doesn't seem to make a difference in children versus adults. But you'd have to truly design that study and carry it out to actually know if it does have a bigger impact on less developed individuals.
Yeah. Another quick question I had. There's been some talk about Deshaun Watson, that would it be in his best interest to retire after having an injury like this happen again? There's been some rumblings of that, re-injury and something like that, David. I mean, would that, from just a physical standpoint, would that be a smart decision to make? Because injuring something twice within a very short amount of time, like, do you risk, and what I mean by that, do you risk not being able to walk, and have a healthy life outside of football?
Yeah, I mean, certainly having, 2 Achilles tears within a 3-month time frame is pretty significant, and definitely means that tissue is weakened, is not as healthy or normal, especially going through another surgery, and then the risks of the surgery, including infection or wound complications. But I don't think that would necessarily be the sole defining reason for him to retire, unless it goes so poorly in his recovery that he cannot run and push off like he normally should be. I think a lot of it is just the competitive nature of the individual and what they want their hobby, job, lifestyle to be like. I definitely, in my perspective, wouldn't necessarily encourage someone to retire just because they went through something like this. That conversation would not happen until they've had their full rehab time to see where they're at that point. Because if, let's say, he goes through a year of rehab and functionally his injured ankle is 60% of his non-injured ankle, he doesn't have top speed anymore, he can't push off. Yeah, that may put him at an increased risk for other injuries just because he cannot defend himself and protect himself. And so in that situation, that conversation is totally warranted. But at this point in time, he's only 2 months out, if that, from his second surgery. So you just can't have that conversation yet, realistically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all speculative at this point, for sure. I agree with that. So.
All right, cool. David, we appreciate you. That was a lot of fun. Definitely more draft talk to come. That's good chat.
We
Good
love
chat.
it. We
All right,
love
David,
it.
we appreciate you. Go Browns.
Go Browns.
All right, that was the medical moment. A couple other ad reads to get through, so just buckle up real quick. Dustin, why don't you tell our listeners about True Fan Travel?
Yeah, guys, if you haven't heard, that's right. The Browns, for the first time in 8 years, are going out of the country to Europe, to London. Go to True Fan Travel and book your trip now. That's right. And if you use the code Brownies, you get $100 off that deposit. That's right. Who can't use $100? Who couldn't use, a Benz, in your pocket, right? $100. Save it. Go to truefantravel.com to book that trip over to London. Also, they will be doing bus trips up to Detroit and also again to Vegas. That was so much fun to go out and take that in Vegas with those guys. But go over to True Fan Travel today to look at those official trips put on by them and the Cleveland Browns.
There you go. Also want to say about our friends over at City Barbecue. Guys, I'm all about barbecue on game day. And even now that it's the off season, I'm all about barbecue any day. So be sure to head on over to City Barbecue. They do catering. You can stop in for lunch or dinner. They have award-winning food. I mean, it is incredible. You can get their merch, you can get the sauces, you can get it all. Beef brisket, pulled pork, chicken, sausage, turkey breast, what have you, ribs, of course, and all the sides. So be sure to go check them out over at City Barbecue.
I was just gonna say, Allie, Roe and Ray and all of us got to go out to the one in Strongsville a couple weeks ago, and they hooked us up with a bunch of City Barbecue. It was amazing. And then we went and saw Hulk Hogan, which that was crazy in itself. We'll be talking more about our new sponsor, Real American Beer, very soon. But it was super cool to just take in the barbecue. And here's the cool thing about City Barbecue. They make it all fresh that day, Allie. So they had one of the meats was out because guess what? They cook it that day and they were out of the meat. So it isn't like it's all prefabbed or whatever, but it's amazing. And you know what? I know your sister is a big fan of the City Barbecue too. And I think she's going to get it for her baby shower, or not baby shower. Sorry, bridal shower.
Am I learning something right here on the podcast that I didn't know?
Okay, that's funny. That's funny because we've all had like little oops on the show, but you got to share that little part with your sister. Yeah, she's got her baby shower, folks. No, for her bridal shower, she's going to have City Barbecue. Dave was probably just laughing.
That's crazy.
Laughing.
I'm gonna call her after this and say, "Hey, anything you need to tell me?"
Yeah, Dustin said he had a baby shower.
Yeah. Isabel. That's something. All right. So just as we wrap up here, just so you all know, pretty much every show going forward is going to be centered around the draft and Myles Garrett. So if that's not your cup of tea, sorry about it, but really that's relevant. We got to talk about all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly.
We got to talk about the Super Bowl. Holy cow.
Absolutely. What do you think of that situation?
I am personally, on a personal level, very happy, and you probably know why. What transpired because that information blew up in Boise, Idaho. Kellen Moore was he was a very big part of why those Philadelphia Eagles thumped on the possibly greatest quarterback of all time. And the very next day, he gets hired by the New Orleans Saints to be a 36-year-old head coach. So, being from Boise, Idaho, I am proud of Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, I know you, and sometime we will have you on the show to talk about your journey.
Great.
I tell you what. But speaking of that, I just wanted to really quickly mention, tease our show a little bit for next week. We are going to have the offensive lineman, Hinsman. That's right, number 75 of the Ohio State Buckeyes 2024 national champions. He's going to come on the show. I had a chance to chat with him and his girlfriend down there, and she leaned in and she goes, "You know what he does? He loves podcasts." I'm like, "Great, let's have him on." She goes, "No, he really loves podcasts." I'm like, "Yeah." And then he said, "Do I need to come in person all the way to Cleveland?" I'm like, "No, I'm not making you drive 2 hours to do our podcast. I mean, you got to go to school, you got to be educated, you gotta do your things, right? You gotta stay in school, get that degree." He's going back for one more year. They think he might be a first-round draft pick next year, which that'd be great for him to make it in the NFL as a first-round offensive line pick. But he'll be on the show next week to talk all great things about Ohio State and his journey growing up. And he comes little hint comes from a little small town, and coming to Columbus was eye-opening for him. So he's going to share a little bit of that experience going to the big city. Like some people that grew up in Magnolia, and then they go to Capital University, and they go to the big city, right? So a little bit about that, Alec.
A little bit, just a touch.
So we're excited to have, and then maybe we don't know yet, but possibly Nathan Zagura next week as well. So get excited, guys. Buckle up. We're going to have some great interviews coming up.
Plenty coming your way. Plenty coming your way. But let's talk about it. Actually, real quick, I want to tell you about our friends over at Lady Caroline in Greater Cleveland Aquarium. You need something to do on a rainy day or a snowy day there in Cleveland. Head on over to Greater Cleveland Aquarium. Check them out. It's family friendly. It's a lot of fun. They've got some really cool exhibits up close, personal with some of the sea life there. And then Dustin, I know you've done this, the Lady Caroline cruise ship. It's a whole experience, right? You get to take in all of Cleveland. I mean, maybe right now is not the best time to do it, just with the weather, of course. But please be sure to go check them out over at Lady Caroline cruise ship.
Yeah, they're getting ready to do their spring voyage here in a couple months. But if you have a private party and you want to go out there, and by the way, we are planning on doing a Here We Go Brownies cruise. That's right. Breaking a little news there. But we're thinking about doing a Here We Go Brownies cruise with the boat guys, doing the show live from the boat, which will be kind of crazy. But and inviting a bunch of Here We Go Brownies fans on. I think that sounds fun, Emily. Like doing like a cocktail cruise and doing a whole thing. That'll be fun. By the way, guys, maybe Allie should come up for that. And if she's up in Cleveland, get on the boat.
Maybe.
Maybe if she's up in there. She's got to come home and see family, guys. We'll figure it out. We'll try to figure it out. So.
It's true. All right. Tell me about it. What do you think of the Super Bowl? I mean, honest to God. All right, let's do this. If we were doing our thing where we pick every game on this podcast like we do, obviously I was out of the country, so we didn't do it, but who would you have taken to win that game?
Well, I was rooting for the Phillies, and I even made a bet with some Phillies, and I made a little money. But and I will tell you this, I had a lot of confidence in Kellen Moore because I know who he is. I know he tries to outthink opponents. Everybody thought that, that the Eagles were going to be run, and he totally tried to do that, right? And then he mixed it up, right? He totally went a different path with with what he did with his play calling. And so, but I will tell you, I thought after the first quarter, the game was over. I will tell you, that was my hunch, my gut, because that front four for the Philadelphia Eagles were nasty, what they were doing, disrupting that offensive line of the Chiefs. I was like, okay, they are the number one defense, and they're showing their wits right now, and they're whooping the ass of the defending world champion.
I mean, they absolutely whoop some ass. I mean, just to, for lack of better words, I mean, look, halfway through the season, I thought the Eagles were frauds. I really did.
You did. You said on this podcast.
Yeah, I said it. I mean, I thought that they were a good team, but I didn't think that they were the best team in the league. But I'll tell you, just 3/4 of the way through the season, and to finish it out, they got hot, and they showed everybody and proved me wrong that they were the best team in the National Football League, top to bottom. That defense was electric. They were disruptive. They were nasty. And then, of course, you've got potentially the best non-quarterback in the league, Saquon Barkley. He just had an incredible season and the reason that they got to the Super Bowl. And then Jalen obviously had a great game, Super Bowl MVP. I mean, just credit to them. I was very excited to see them do it. I kind of like Philly, I'm good for them. I know that they've been.
I don't think they're fans. I like Philly, but I don't like their fans. Their fans are obnoxious. I mean, I think most people would agree. Philly fans are. I mean, they knock over lamp plows.
They've got them. I get it. They take it up a notch. I don't disagree with that, but good for them. Good for them.
Well, I just say, Allie, when you were gone, so many things happened. I'm like, Allie leaves the country.
Yeah.
The Cavs make a big trade and get a great player. Everything the whole world kind of went crazy in Cleveland land. But we'll have to talk about some Cavs and Guardians next time on the next show. But there's some great things happening with the Guardians coming up with spring training and all that. And then of course the Cavs, I mean, they just continue to roll. They're looking good. So I'm pretty excited for the Cavs. I'm just excited for this town. I mean, Allie, we talked about this. Maybe I said, are we in the golden era of sports in Cleveland? Like, I can't think in my lifetime where, I mean, the Browns, obviously they went down last year, but the Cavs could win it all this year. I mean, it's not without the outside the realm. Nobody saw the Guardians come in last year and they went to the ALCS. Like, we're a good sports town again. Two out of three, right? Maybe at some point we'll get 3 out of 3, but all of a sudden we're a good sports town, and we're not used to that, Allie. It's like we don't know what to do with ourselves when we're winning. I feel like we've been so shell shocked for most of our life and waiting for the shoe to fall. Like, oh, it's Cleveland, something's terrible is going to happen. But it's like, you know what? Maybe we need to embrace this and get back to saying, why not Cleveland? I know it's Cleveland against the world, but yeah, sometimes Cleveland does beat the world, and it does happen.
Sometimes they do that. Sometimes, hopefully soon. Dustin, before we wrap up, why don't you tell our listeners about Legacy Integrated?
That's right, guys. One of our newest sponsors, Legacy Integrated, assists individuals with hands-off, diversified investment options that generate passive incomes. Email Brian at thelegacyintegrated.com and schedule a passive income meeting. That's right, a free introductory call. They'll tell you how to get into types of all different kinds of properties that you can actually be like a fractional owner of. That's right. No toilets, no tenants. Their focus is hands-off, passive income to diversify your portfolio. That's right. Email Brian at thelegacyintegrated.com for more information.
There you go. There you have it. All right, Dustin, any closing thoughts as we wrap up on a beautiful Wednesday?
It's not beautiful. It's snowing. It's cold. So it's not beautiful, but it's beautiful probably in Florida. So you got the beautiful weather there. I got nothing. I'm just glad you're back. I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you're back in the country. Sorry about your patio area in the pool.
Yeah,
I just feel like house disasters are part of your life now. You had what happened in at the condo in South Carolina. Like houses don't like you. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Must be bad luck or something. I don't know.
No, it's just houses. Everything else you have really good luck with.
Everything else is fine, but yeah, my property's not great.
But you also, I mean, the stuff in South Carolina that happened was not because of weather related.
No, not at all. That was just a freak out.
You did live through a hurricane there, so I mean, you are in an area that does have,
several
difficult weather at times. So
yeah. There we go. There you have it. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Stay safe, stay healthy. And as always, Browns fans, go Browns.